Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Ruben and Jessie show. I am Jesse,
And I'm Ruben.
and we are back again with another incredible, awesome, fantastic episode talking about life, talking about some not so happy updates to our world and what we're doing, and then some amazing consolations, which we're going to get into. So, Ruben, my brother, how you doing?
I mean, you heard me on Friday. This is 2 days after this day, but I was quite upset on the email we received um, about our Spartan race.
Yep.
As many of you may or may not, depending on when you're listening to this, but it's currently December 13th, 2020, and California decided to go into a very strict lockdown for its second time. So very similar to when COVID first came around, and that caused our Spartan race to get canceled because they're not sure what the state of the world will be in February. So due to all the closures and everything, the Spartan, I guess, company reached out to all the people who signed up for this race, and it's been canceled. So, Jesse, I know I was relatively upset. I don't know how you felt. I felt like when we spoke, you kind of had this expectation already, and you were just like, "Cool, we'll figure something else out," right? Like you already had the expectation, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I remember I called you a little while before that. We were talking about tickets, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll get the ticket to Austin, but I'll wait. I'm gonna wait on the California tickets because everything I'm hearing about what's going on over there, it seems like they're uh, those who are in power are quite pacified about what's going on in the world. Um, and my feelings on that are a separate conversation, but I mean, I was definitely upset. Like I was more upset after we got off the phone call. I guess because you
Mm.
were upset, I was like, I'm gonna be here for Ruben for a second and just like hold space. But then once I got off, I was pretty tight because I was like, yo, we've been putting in work. Like we actually
Word.
been putting in work to compete and to do our thing, and lots of hours. And then there's a certain sense of identity that I think you become attached to as like I'm a person who's training for this thing,
Right.
and that is sort of the meaning behind everything that you're doing. And then when that gets taken away from you, you're kind of just like, okay, well, eh, I, you know. I, like, what do I do with my training now? What does it mean? How do I adapt to what's going on? Am I still pushing on the same mileage that I have been? Am I doing something else? What does this open up for my life now? Because, we've talked about it in the past, like these are hours every day we're committing to the training. It's not just the training itself, but like because of the amount of running you're doing, you're also doing a lot of recovery. So all
Exactly.
that taken into consideration, not that you stop doing recovery, you stop training, but the load isn't required as much as it was at the time. And so you start have to like really wondering like, okay, now I have to like change everything. Um, so yeah, man, I was definitely sad about the whole thing, but it could be worse. That's what I said on the phone. It could be worse.
Yeah,
There are
could be
tougher
worse.
things. There are tougher things to deal with that a lot of people are dealing with. So we just get to move on and figure something else out, which we are figuring out. And if you want, you can tell the people a little bit about that. What's going on?
Yes. So,
Moving.
well, obviously, first, we're not entirely giving up. We just decided to push it way far in the future. So right now, it's just like coming up with a maintenance protocol to kind of, make sure that our bodies, we can jump right in when the training needs to, when the race is close. Once COVID becomes a thing of the past and we're able to go back to some semblance of whatever normal is going to look like moving forward. um, but yeah, like now our focus gets to shift. And that shift is really our coaching, which is kind of where this podcast really started. Was our idea of like we want to get into coaching. We're big into health, but more so holistic health, based on, I feel like for me, it's mostly the people that I followed and grew up listening to are all really like these holistic people, whether they're in fitness, life coaching, which, I don't like that word of life coaching. Like, who are you to be a life coach? But but it's a word that gets thrown out there, and people do hire those people, which is, very interesting. I think we have an actual life coach coming on the podcast in a few weeks, actually, so we can ask her about that. um, but now it's really about us, really stepping into our coaching. I have my website already built. I've been working in the background trying to figure out how to do like email stuff, because I know that's a great way to connect with your audience. So you can, if you're listening to that now and you want to get on the email list, please do. While I learn MailChimp. but I see you sent me today, actually, a beginnings of your website. So you want to talk a little bit about what you got going on with your Centaur Health? I think that's what it was called.
Yeah, Centaur Well is going to be the name. And if you notice on Instagram, I had also changed my name to Jessie the Centaur. The reason is because, one, I think centaur is just a cool word. And if you've ever seen images of a centaur, it's like a half horse, half, Adonis type looking man with a bow and arrow who's like ready to crush. So it looks pretty badass. But where I actually got the idea from was there is this book that I've been talking a lot about called Sex, Ecology, and Spirituality, The Spirit of Evolution by Ken Wilber. It's a really incredible book, and he talks about, the different stages of development, everything from like stars to planets to life forms, and then to sort of the mental sphere, or what's called like the nous sphere. And within the nous sphere, there are levels of development as well. And there's a bunch. The three main ones that we all are familiar with, as far as we've heard about them or have talked about them or have related to them in some way, are like magical, mythical, and then rational. And then there's centauric. And so I won't go into full depth about what all those mean, because that's like hours of, it's just a lot to say. But basically, the centauric level of consciousness is where you're able to connect your body and your mind. And that's literally, if you look at a centaur as a metaphor, he's literally a connection of human and
nature.
And nature, right? He's and a connection of body and mind. And body in this sense, not meaning like your human body, which, yes, technically it's like a double entendre, but the body as in the biosphere, the life form energy that you exist within. And so I just thought that's a really cool concept, and it's completely aligned with holistic lifestyle coaching. And for me, what I'm really excited about is like I have, like, if I'm speaking vulnerably here, I've put off coaching for a long time. Even though I'm trained in it, I've trained at the Czech Institute. I worked at the Czech Institute for almost a year and a half now. And I've been studying this stuff for years. I know how to coach people. I just avoided it. I was doing it for a little bit at some point, but because of all my own personal issues that I was experiencing, I just felt that I was in no place to give other people advice or teach other people how to do that. And I didn't see a lane for me within coaching where I could come off as a normal person, in the sense that, like, one of the main problems I've had, and we were just joking about it, right? Like the idea of life coaching, like one of the main, and it's funny because you've sent me people that you've wanted to bring onto the show, where I look at their shit and I'm just like this is why I don't want to be a coach.
It's too positive. It's not realistic.
It's too positive. It's too like it's too emotion based. It's too
Right.
like to me, sometimes it feels like you are just doing this for yourself in the sense
Right.
that, but like you're not owning it that you're doing it for yourself. You know, I don't mind if you do shit for yourself as long
Mm-hmm.
as you're owning that you're doing that. Or yeah, I've just seen it. I haven't seen it done well enough times where someone who is sharing education or teachings and living holistically do it in a way where it's not just like it feels like bullshit to me, or it feels like you're just saying all the right things, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
feel from you as a person that you're living this way. And so I've just been really turned off. And I always appreciate guys like Cameron Haynes because he's not offering any coaching. He doesn't offer
Nope.
anything. You know, he just lives his life, and people are inspired by that.
Same thing with David Goggins.
Yeah,
All these
exactly.
guys.
Yeah, David Goggins doesn't offer coaching. He's just like, this is how I live my life. Yeah, David Goggins is probably one of the guys who I've seen him do it right, at least from his book. Like his book is not like,
It's
here's
not a
how I like
how-to.
it's just like it's so raw, it's so real. And I've always wanted to figure out, well, like where does that lane exist for me?
Mm.
Um uh, Especially when I was working at the assemblage. For those of you who don't know, the assemblage is sort of where this podcast really started. It was a co-working space that held a lot of. It was a hub for different people who were either practitioners or had businesses that were somehow linked to different spiritual practices or wellness practices. We had guys like Deepak Chopra come and speak there. Actually, Ken Wilber, I believe, spoke at the assemblage, which
What?
is such a shame because I didn't even know who he was at the time, but I wish I
Right.
did. I probably set up his event. That's what I did there. I probably set it up and I had no idea. You know, Aubrey Marcus gave a talk, gave multiple talks there. So it's really that kind of space. And that place really turned me off, honestly, to coaching in many ways because I just
Mm.
saw like everyone was just like saying the same
I
shit.
could
And
totally see that too. When we used to shoot our podcast there and all the people we used to meet and used to like kind of like talk to because I know that was part of your job. It was so interesting because you're like, I used to be one of those people when I was in my early 20s because, and I think, and sorry, I like interjected, bro. So
no,
I'll
no,
let you
please.
finish. Yeah.
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think that coming from a place of pain
Mm,
requires you to overindulge in that space. So I think
mm,
for me,
mhm,
because of the pain of growing up as with a single mother, growing up with I talked about all these things in the podcast, single mother, not doing too great, having to work at an early age to make sure I can still enjoy my teenage years and my early childhood in a sense. I started working at like 13 and having to do all that like while I'm in school, while I'm doing all this, always exhausted, always tired, and then getting into a very abusive relationship, which kind of led me into the path of like this whole self-help world, right?
mhm,
And it really I had to like overcompensate because I was in such pain that I overcompensated when I like watched The Secret, because
mhm,
that's really what like kind of was my entryway, right? And that's a funny entryway, and it helped at that time in my life, I think.
yeah.
So because I don't like the word life coach, but maybe back then I would have been okay with it. But as I've grown and grown to understand the human experience, especially reading books like Laws of Human Nature, and reading a lot of Robert Greene's work, history, and things of psychology, philosophy, and all these things, and moving away from self-help and going to was the root of self-help. And it's like, oh, it's philosophy, psychology, and all these other things. And when you start getting to the root of it, you're like, oh, we're like fucked up. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But so like, why can't we showcase all parts of ourselves instead of this one-dimensional part, which is kind of what I was doing after watching The Secret. I got heavy into affirmations, bro. Like I was one of those people who recorded himself saying affirmations and would listen to it on repeat. Uh,
Mhm,
for like, I did that for like multiple years, bro. I would fall asleep listening to my affirmations. Did it work? I have no idea. But based on like those affirmations, I still have the list like somewhere in my computer of the affirmations that I did. And when I look at it now, I am those things. So did it
mhm,
work? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe it's just a life experience that got me that way. But it's funny how like, you know, people just overcompensate like I did because I had that experience until I was maybe like 24, 25, where I started to like kind of grow out of that in a sense. Like my evolution was because it was just like, oh, like the darkness is a good thing. Like the darkness is, when we talk about that, like being in the darkness is actually where you truly find your power, not just that optimism.
Yeah,
So
man.
it's
Yeah.
funny how we do that.
Yeah, that's a perfect way of framing it, like this idea of overcompensation. I
Mm,
mean, I guess that's what I would say is that I felt from people who were ingenuine, and that's not to say that everyone at the assemblage
mm,
was genuine. Assemblage is a beautiful place, and I'm eternally grateful for having been a part of that experience. And there were some people who I met there who were really like spiritually solid people.
right.
There were some men and women there who were like, "Yo, you got your shit together." Like you're an inspiration. You are definitely an inspiration. But then there were other people, like you said, who were like, you could just feel the overcompensation. You can feel like this is a story that they're constantly trying to tell themselves. And same as you, that's something that I've fallen into that trope as well of like, you know, being Mr., whether it's with nutrition, whether it was with certain ideologies of how I thought people should act or how I should act. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I'm in a dark
Mm,
cave, dealing with all these demons. And I guess that's what I never wanted to. When it came to coaching and creating content, I never wanted to come off hypocritical or contradicting. And I feel like when you present yourself in that way, you can really make it easy to contradict yourself.
mm.
And that's also, another huge inspiration for the type of stuff I want to do moving forward is Mark Manson, actually.
Oh, yes, me too, bro. That's my
Yeah.
dude.
I know that's your dude. I don't follow him like you do. I know you really enjoy his content, but like his books were amazing. And I love that what he does is same thing. He's not telling you, like he's not like I'm a life coach and I live beautifully all the time. He's saying no, life is really fucking hard. And here are like things that I've learned from different philosophers, different people, like just different people in his experience from reading or just personal experience. And he's created systems of thought. He's created
Exactly.
systems of thought of how to maneuver in certain areas. And that's what I'm most like for me, that's what I'm most interested in when it comes to like creating blogs and creating videos moving forward.
Hmm.
How can I take what I'm learning in these books, what I'm learning in just experience, and craft these like thought systems, how to create
Right.
systems of um, actions, of practices that get you to a certain place in life. Because that's one of the things that used to freak me out the most about coaching too, which is why I didn't want to do it, was like how do I get somebody who is really jacked up in the head, like telling him you just got to eat organic food is not what he needs. How
Nope.
do I get someone who, because they know, most people know what they need to do, they just don't do it because of all the other shit that's going on inside of
Hmm.
them. And I used to be terribly afraid of trying to just be, because I've gotten that, when as I've mentioned on this podcast, I have a fly in my room. um as I mentioned on this podcast before, I've dealt with my own uh, issues around food and just my own mental issues. And like every coach, majority of the coaches that I've worked with, it was all the same shit. It was just like, here are your macros, or like, here's the type of food you're gonna eat, and blah blah blah. And it was in some way or another the same thing. And I was like, this is great. Like, of course this is gonna work, but I'm not seeing results because there's shit underneath that I'm dealing with
Hmm.
that's not getting me there. But then I would go to those people, right? I would go to the other uh, place of like, it's just the mental stuff. It's just like the mental work, and they lack on so many things there.
Hmm.
And it's on all these pockets that basically the different pockets that I've learned from, where I'm like, okay, how do I start bringing these ideas together? And that's really how I live my life now. And so I'm just super excited to put that content out there, and then also craft that content for myself, because I learn from sharing. So for me, it's going to be really exciting to like put these ideas together in like a beautiful art form, and
Hmm.
then bring it out into the world.
It's funny, and I'm gonna double back on when you were talking about Mark Manson for those folks who might have never read any of his work. But there's an example. So Karina and I listened to his. He came out with a special audiobook only on Amazon, so only on Audible. It was called "Love Is Not Enough," which is from an article that he wrote many years ago. Fantastic article. If y'all, I'll put it in the show notes so folks can get it easier. But it's like one of my favorite articles from him because he talks about like the whole idea of Disney and like how the Cinderella archetype came to be and like how we all want this we always see the happy ending, but that's just not the case in real life, which is funny because when Karina and I first got together, that was her mindset. And maybe we'll have our girls on the podcast one day to kind of discuss that. But I shattered that whole illusion for her, and I was willing to risk the fact that she wouldn't want to be with me because I shattered that illusion. Does that make sense? And I learned that from Mark Manson, actually, from reading his work, because he's the type of person that will like basically find a way to make you not be with that person. But if you can withstand that heat, you're in a great relationship because you can withstand that heat. So in his book, the audio book, The Love Is Not Enough, you follow the journey of like four people who are dealing with their own. There's like a married couple, there's like a single lesbian woman, there's like a single man, and I forgot the fourth person, but basically he's giving them all like dating advice, like all this stuff he goes over, and like he says it in the book. He's like and like between, it's like a podcast, and then like David Goggins, where like you have your podcast parts and then some parts he's just narrating. And he says that he's like, my goal is not to see if this will work and like continue to make this work, but I'm going to ask you questions to find kinks in your armor of the relationship, right? But I think that's what a coach is supposed to do. And I've read books on coaches and sports teams. I got a book that I can't wait to read after I finish leadership. But I have my first coach, and it's about these NFL players and their fathers, because the father is like technically their first coach. And like how they push them beyond what they think and all these different things. And I think that's what a coach is. Instead of, they're your cheerleader, but at the same time, they'll hold you accountable to what you're supposed to be doing. And I think that we play both those parts as coaches. I mean, I get to do it every day, thankfully, at my day job. I get to be a coach, and it's beautiful because you don't see it right away. But like 8 months later, you kind of see the work that you put in that first 3 months. You kind of see it later, and you're like, oh, they were actually listening, even though I thought they weren't listening. Or like I would ask them questions and they'd be unsure about the answer at that time, but they put in the work of thinking about it. It might have needed to, you plant the seed and then it sprouts, and then you get to see what the work that you put in, you invested into this person. You get to see them grow. It's beautiful, man. But it's like, it's tough. I mean, for me, I don't know about you, man, but I'm impatient. I like to see results right away. And when you work with people, everyone's on their own time, and that's something I've had to learn over the last 2 years. Is like, how can I see this person grow really fast? And it's like, well, that's not the case. The human experience is so different to everyone. Some people just require additional time, and then they say thank you later, even though you feel like you didn't do anything. You feel like a failure sometimes. Later on, you notice that it worked. And I think it's BS if someone's like, in 30 days I'll get you to change your entire diet, and it's just like, is that for short term or long term? Because there's questions I have. Right?
Yeah. No, that's great. And even the picture of the idea of like your first coach being your father, what that implies to me is also that a huge thing about coaching is just showing up. Like a huge part about coaching is not what you say or how amazing your tactics are or your systems are or any of that stuff. It's, are you a living example for that person? Are you someone that person can inspire and aspire to become? I think that more than anything is what's important and what gets people excited to participate and want to invest in you as a support system. because they see that you yourself are someone who is different than those that are around them, and they're able to take what you have to offer, and just take your energy, and be able to apply that to themselves. And that's what I found. Like anyone who's inspired me to do better has only been because they themselves are those people. They themselves live holistically and offer. And you can see it. You can see when somebody really approaches life in that way. Whether it's like look at the people we follow: Aubrey Marcus, Elliot Hulse, Paul Check. All these guys, the Aaron Alexander, like all these guys. Why do we don't follow? Like, there's a bunch of jacked fitness dudes in the world. There's so many of those types of influencers, but why do we like constantly find ourselves being interested in specific types of people? As because you could feel the energy of that person, some level of like wholeness, and you want to find that within yourself. And so yeah, and I agree. Shit's gonna take time. For someone to develop. Like, look at your own development. That shit took time, bro.
10 years, man. 10 years. 10 years to be as accountable as I am today.
And for myself too, it's a constant process. And I think that's something I'm still gonna have to get over, moving into coaching. Is because I constantly see how I fail all the time, or like how I am, falling short of what my idea of excellence is all the time. And so for me, the trope has always been like, who the fuck am I to give anyone else any advice? Because look how I'm feeling here, look how I'm feeling there. But I don't remember exactly who said it to me, but it was really great advice, which is basically just like, coaching doesn't mean that you yourself are, absolutely amazing and incredible all the time. You're exactly what you said. You're a cheerleader, and you're someone that holds someone else accountable. They're paying for you to support them in being the best version of themselves. And that looks different for every person. And your 10% better or 1% better is vastly different than someone who's coming to you for coaching. Exactly. You're worth it if you're 10 steps ahead of someone else. Those 10 steps are huge. Imagine if someone can get you 10 steps ahead of where you are right now.
Big difference, man.
Big difference. You know what I mean? So, and I think this sort of leads into what else we wanted to talk about today, because why are we doing this? Why are we so interested in, we've been doing this podcast. We both have full-time jobs. The future we see for ourselves is, in the woods somewhere, fucking to ourselves, just doing our own things. Why the fuck are we so interested in
chop wood, carry water, baby?
Yeah. Why are we so interested in fucking coaching? And I guess it's a great time to talk about the election and
what
that means to us versus what it may mean to the listener. So hashtag trigger warning, and to anyone else out there in the world. So I guess I just would want to start here because I think it's just funny. Like, I remember those like 3 days where we were kind of figuring out like, well, who's winning,
yeah.
And it was crazy. I mean, like, I heard that like if Trump got more votes than Obama did in this election, then
more people went out and voted because it was so ingrained with 2020. No one else had anything else to do.
Yeah, it was top of mind, and to some people, the most important thing in the world.
Right.
And I remember the way I found out that Biden became president, because I wasn't following the news or anything. I just knew it was like in the air that it was going to happen at any moment, that someone's going to win. And I'm sitting in my room like I'm sitting right now. And then all I hear is honking and screaming and cheering. And then one guy goes, "The nightmare is almost over." And I was like, all right, especially where I live, I was like, that's definitely, I guess Biden won. and people were crying, and there were
Right.
memes flying around, and
Right.
yada yada yada, and it was just crazy. How about you? Where were you at when you found out that Biden won?
I mean, it was a weekday, I think, like a Tuesday, right? I think a Monday or a Tuesday we found out. And it was just, I was at work
Mm-hmm.
and we received an email from the CEO because my job, my day job is very liberal. I mean, I respect them because we're trying to do some really good work in America and get, people like myself, Puerto Rican, Latino, Black and brown students into these organizations to, do well for themselves. So we got an email and it was just like, congratulations type of thing. Like, not a congratulatory, but like, oh, hey, like what we wanted to happen as an organization happened. And now we can really do good work with the support of the government because my job, they do work with the government to some extent, especially when it comes to funding and where funding should go when it comes to like education and whatnot. Um, so yeah, that's how I found out. And it was cool and everything, but I'm just like, I don't know about, us. I think we ask questions. It's just like, I'm not the type to just be like, oh, I want to celebrate. I'm just like, all right, what now, bro? Like, I'm not celebrating. There's no time to fucking celebrate. We're in a crisis, a pandemic. The whole time we were following, Karina and I would watch the debates between Trump and Biden. And I was just like, y'all not answering the most important questions. What the fuck are y'all gonna do? And that would always make me mad because they're just like throwing stabs at each other. And the moderator would ask a question, no one would answer it, or they would like really answer very vaguely. I was just like, fucking politics, man. Like,
It's also a terrible way to talk
yes,
about issues. Like you got 2 minutes. You have 2 minutes to talk about issues that affect an entire country.
and
It's
more because we're such,
yeah.
so important in the economic global economy.
It's so
Like,
crazy.
it
You
drove
got
me
2 minutes.
nuts.
2 minutes to talk about this. It's
it
crazy.
it drove me nuts, that whole experience, and it really made, I never been into politics, and it
No.
made me think about obviously what you said, like when it comes to like government and how we should like show up, it's just like, oh, this needs a lot of work, a lot of work. And whoever is president, it didn't matter. Yeah, it would have been great if we had a first female president and all this stuff, like, but still it wouldn't matter because it's like, what are you going to do? Like, what are those things? I want to hear what the future holds, because guess what, like, we need to figure it out. And it kind of, and it will lead to this, like, it kind of brought it back to the individual and the collective, like, oh, forget that, I'm not going to do it. Forget the government. Like, I can't deal with that. It's too much to think about. And I know people, and I always say, I don't know how much they got going on in their lives that they even have time to worry about politics. Because I'm like, I feel like I'm so busy with things that adding politics just causes me anxiety. So I'm like, what can I control and what can I focus on? And who can I bring into my tribe, right? Because I think it's a sense of individualism and collectivism, right? The East is so successful because they are collective. When I lived in China, you see it. It's ingrained in their culture on how close they are, versus here, you see how individualistic we
But
are.
that has its own drawbacks too.
Exactly. No,
Country
that's why you need both.
homogenous. Yeah, when a country's so homogenous, it has its own really deep issues.
Exactly. So I feel like that's what I learned living in China and seeing, like, okay, there's strengths there, and then there's like, oh, you need to figure some stuff out for
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah.
And then over here it's like, oh, you have to figure it out for yourself, but how do you help the
Mhm.
tribe? How do you help your community?
Yes.
So we need to bring both of them together, and this is like why I wanted to really get into coaching and really, like, what we're trying to work on, like having the farm, having land to make sure we have a space that people can come to and work and put in work into themselves. And how, because it starts with yourself in order for you to share. It's like Aubrey Marcus has this program called Fit for Service. How do you make yourself fit for service? I love that idea of like
Yeah.
building yourself up so that you can share, you can gift more. And as you gift more, people will be gifting others. And it starts with you. And how I've been seeing it in my head visually is like we're like a web, right? And there's the point in the middle where the spider usually hangs out, and that's like where you are at. And as you continue to impact others, it's like this web gets to spread, and the more impacts you make, you impact 5 people at the end of, in 20 years, that's impacting millions, and
Yes.
without you even knowing.
Yes.
But we're so like, in America, we're so like, I need to see it because we live in this, we want to be all Hollywood. Thank you, social media, for wanting that. And everyone kind of wants a piece of that. And it's just the value of that is diminishing slowly, which I think is good. Like the value of being this, person and high and famous. And it's like, we're starting to see like, oh, famous people are destroyed. Like they're fucked up people.
How can
And
you
they don't
not
get,
be? How can you not? How can you not be destroyed,
exactly. And I think it's funny because I think who was on Joe Rogan's podcast that they talked about this, and it's just like, oh, we're starting to see that, back in the 90s, you see the famous people, everyone wanted to be those people. But now with the invention of social media, we get to see truly how these people live, and it sucks. They can't do anything,
It's
you know?
crazy.
So I'll let
Yeah,
you.
I mean,
I rambled for a bit.
I love everything. I love everything you're saying. Like the thing about politics is, me too. I'm half a chimp. Like I don't know anything,
Right.
really. I don't know anything really. And this is, it's funny because now I've heard Aubrey say this. I've heard Paul Chek say this, and it was sort of where I got to at some point too, because whenever I would get into a conversation about politics, I'd get really upset. And most of the time I get really upset, and I would get frustrated because people would try to come at me about, well, this person has this policy and that person has that policy, and this is what this system's doing and this is what they're doing, and these are the statistics here and this is the statistics there. And on some level, like, all those things are valid, and ultimately they are valid things to look at. But what I was getting really upset about, and I was having trouble articulating, because I was trying to articulate in the same way. I was trying to articulate by like, well, look at these policies and look at this person, look at blah, blah, blah. And obviously I don't know shit from that perspective. So I'm like, I was getting frustrated because I was like, I know my intuition knows what I'm feeling is true, but I don't know how to say it, until I got to this point where what I realized is what I have a problem with is I don't give a fuck, me personally. I don't give a fuck about the policies and what this person's idea of the future is and that person's idea of the future is. Like, those are important, but what I give a fuck about is like, who are these people? Like, who is it? What is the energy this person's bringing forward? What is the idea? What are the sort of underlying vibrations of this entire thing? And the entire thing's fucking crazy. And I just have a problem with the whole system. Like, when someone tells me, Biden's going to save the world or save our country because he is not XYZ what Trump is, or because
Yep.
he has XYZ experience, or because he promises XYZ. It's like, do you understand that literally almost half the country disagrees with you? Literally almost
Right.
half and on both sides, like half the country disagrees with your perception of what is good and what's bad. That person who screamed the nightmare is almost over, there is that same person in a different part of this country that said the nightmare has just begun. You know what I mean? Like, we're so divided, and for us not to accept that whoever's on the other side of what you believe is also a person with views and ideas of what's right and what's wrong, is so missed. It's so missed. It's like, people get so excited that, especially like being in New York City, I hear a lot of this all the time. Like, they think the world's, not. I will say a lot of people recognize that Biden's not the best option.
Right.
but they also assume that Biden's just, he's a lesser evil. But like, in whose eyes? In whose eyes is he a lesser evil? There's a lot of people who don't agree with that. And for us, I really started thinking about this because in some ways, I'm still young, you're still young, but we are getting older, and we are thinking about, well, like, what the fuck does this mean for our lives? But then also, like, what is the world we are participating in, for the future, for our loved ones, for our children, all these things. And like, it's become more and more top of mind for me, because I guess I've never, what 2020 has done for me is it's like exploded all of the bullshit that goes on in the world that I never had to participate in, because I lived in a bubble. Everyone around me was healthy. Everyone around me was holistic. Everyone around me was XYZ. And even those who weren't really around me, but like were on the outer edge, they had a sense of homeostasis where they showed their best versions of themselves. But as soon as shit hit the fan, then you see, the true sides of people. You see the true sort of contradictions that live within themselves and within myself. I'm not saying I've been holy and perfect this entire time. I've had to deal with my own sort of coming, sobering to the moment, and realizing that, like, hey, how am I participating? How am I gonna, if I have access to information and I have a certain sense of stability that allows me to express thoughts that are highly disagreeable with others, what can I do to really start sharing more and more of that? Because what I'm recognizing is, like, the system actually has to change. And like, people have been saying that for like forever, you know what I mean? People have been saying that for like the system, right? But like, it actually looks like the system actually has to change, or we're in some serious danger. Like, that's how I really feel. That's how I at least, and maybe that's paranoia to some degree, but in my eyes, I'm like, wow, we're so fucking lost as a people. We're so lost in understanding of what's health, what's not health, what's good for the soul, what's bad for the soul. Like, we're so tripped out that it's like, if any those of us who are sober, we gotta wake people. Those of us who are awake, we gotta shake the bed for some people,
Right.
and we have the responsibility. And for a while, I've felt like, I'm just gonna keep living life the way I want to live it. I'm gonna do me, stay in my lane, take care of my people, blah blah blah. But I'm realizing, is like, I gotta do this for myself. Like, I gotta wake other people up for myself, because if they don't wake the fuck up, I'm fucked, and
Exactly.
and they're fucked, and we're all fucked. And so that to me hit really hard. So when it comes to politics, is like, I don't even understand when people say politics, I don't even understand what they mean by that anymore, because everything is politics at this point.
Exactly.
Everything you do is political. Your act, the way you behave is political, because what is politics, right? It's agreed upon rules of behavior, and the agreed upon rules right now fucking suck dick. So those of us who have some better ideas, it doesn't matter where you come from or who you are. You're fucking Ragnar, and from
Vikings.
if you ever watch Vikings, bro, you're Ragnar, and you got a new idea. Season 1, you got a new idea of what this world can be, and what is there to offer. And you gotta rise up and talk some shit. So
And that's freaking what I like really instill, and I use my day job, because this is what I get to do every day, and I still that in all the students that I teach. It's just like, you are a leader in your own life. I'm always talking about, the way you treat your body. If it's not like a temple, what are you doing? The way how do you exercise your mind every day? Because it's like the gym. It's like going to the gym every day, and you get to do that here. But are you taking full advantage of it? Are you just coasting, right? Because we literally have a term for some people when we're like gauging their readiness to go into internship. We're like, oh, is this a coaster? A coaster is just someone hanging out in the back, just making sure, like, this moment in time that we're living in, we cannot have any more coasters. Like
No.
everyone needs to put in some kind of work.
Yeah.
Everybody. Like we need to move forward from where we've been, where we're going, because like it's not looking pretty. And you know, like we're not saying anything about like our presidential I mean, I didn't like either choice. I never did. Like I was just like once my person fell off, who was Andrew Yang, because I thought he was
Yeah.
ahead. Like his mindset was looking so far ahead. I was like, we need someone like that who has that 2020 vision of like a decade from now. He's looking beyond his own 4 years or 8 years of being in office, which I respect people like that who just have the mind, right? He was young, energetic. So that's who I was
That's
rooting
the
for. But
thing, right? It's the energy. Like
the
forget like
energy,
imagine you knew nothing about Andrew Yang. Imagine you had Trump, Biden, and Andrew Yang at dinner, right? And you these guys weren't politicians, right? These guys weren't. Imagine you just had to you just went on a date with them, right? You just went to lunch or dinner with them. Like who would you have a better time with?
Yang
Like
for
that's
sure.
you know what I mean? Who would you have a better? Who would you feel more connected to and more understanding, and who would leave you feeling better than when you came in? You got one guy who would probably, make you feel like shit. You got one guy who's gonna confuse you, and then you got another guy. You got another guy who's gonna make you feel excited and energized. Maybe he'll give you some business tips, and maybe he'll show you how to like navigate certain things better, and tell you some cool stories from college. Like that's who the fuck you want. This idea that we want these like 70-plus-year-old men who are like so out of touch with people, just saying what they're supposed to say, or just moving on their whatever their agenda is, just sticking to that for so long. It's fucking crazy. uh,
Puppets, man, puppets.
yeah, it's crazy. Like when you see like like most politicians, and actually I don't want to say most. I don't know most politicians. At least the politicians that I've seen, they all communicate a certain way. Have you noticed that?
Yeah,
Like there's like politician voice and politician posture and politician speech, and everything is politician, politician,
it's all
politician.
curated.
Yeah, Andrew Yang and some of the, and this is what gets me excited, because a lot of people who were who were Democratic candidates, I don't remember all their names, but um, you got Marianne Williams, you got Andrew Yang, you had that one chick from I think Hawaii who was on the ballot, at least for when they were doing the Democratic nominees. These are young people who
Hmm.
talked like people. They talked like people. You know what I mean? They didn't
Exactly,
talk.
they make sense.
Yeah, they didn't talk like this other type of creature. Um, and so that does get me excited. That does get me excited for the future. And it gets me excited for as we get older and more people who are like us, um, are having platforms and are starting at an early age to communicate certain shit. It's dope. And to tie that all back to like um, coaching, is like we're offering coaching because if you're somebody if you're still listening, it's because you resonate with what we're saying, right?
Hmm.
If you're still listening, it's because you resonate with what the fuck we're seeing in the world, and you're like, I see that shit too, but I'm unhealthy, I can't get my diet right, my sleep is shit, um, I'm way too insecure to put my art or my creativity or my interests out there into the world, and I don't know what the fuck to do, and I don't know how to set myself up so I can be a leader, or so I can
Right.
really showcase to others who I am. And that's what the fuck we're here to do. And it doesn't matter whether you choose to work with Ruben or you choose to work with me. We're doing this because we need more people um, standing up in their own way, in their own in their own uniqueness, to get out there and operate at the highest way they possibly can, so they can make a change in their communities and what they have to bring to the world. And so that's, at least that's what I'm excited about.
100%, man. And it's not like we are. I know that you're more let's say intense than me. Like I still, occasionally play video games. I still do all these things that, sometimes people would preach like, oh, that's bad for you. And it's just like, well, and I don't know. Did I send you the article about like phone usage? No, I probably didn't. So I've read this article by Kevin Rose. If you're not familiar with Kevin Rose, he's been on the Tim Ferriss podcast several times. I believe he's like an investor in like all these like companies. Like he was one of the early investors, so he made a lot of his money there. And he writes articles about tech. He wrote an article about phone usage, which in my head, it was just like, whether that's video games, it kind of came up for anything. And he's like, at the end of the day, we have to be conscious of what we're choosing to read, what we're choosing. Every time we choose to pick up our phone, every time you choose to pick up the controller for your TV or game system, like you're consciously choosing it, and you're not just like, hitting auto, hitting auto of your life and just like picking up your phone 100 times a day, or going to watch Netflix because you have nothing else to do, versus like sitting in the silence for a bit to kind of be like, okay, I know what I have to do today. It's like consciously choosing to watch TV because you did what you had to do, so you can, reward yourself. And that's, I think, when it comes to like everything we're talking about today, there's a sense of self-awareness that needs to be practiced. And I know it's probably the most important thing, like being consciously self-aware of everything you're doing, making conscious choices to listen to something instead of being auto, right? Like consciously choosing to listen to music because you feel like you want to just feel a little euphoric, a little pick me up, and maybe add some energy to your day. Consciously choosing to listen to this podcast because you want to get a certain learning from it, or whatever the case may be. Like at the end of the day, and I think as a coach, like that's what we're helping people with. Like, where can you find the self-awareness to understand, like, I'm choosing, if it's nutrition, I'm choosing to eat this because of X, or I choose to eat this because of Y. You know what I mean? Like you're constantly, and in the beginning it's hard. I feel like it was so hard for me to make a conscious choice as to why I'm doing something. Some of them, I'm not perfect. I'm pretty sure, bro, we're doing the same thing. Like some are still unconscious where I just do a thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, I'm like, fuck, why did I do that?
Mm-hmm.
Or like, fuck, why did I eat that? But guess what? I get to learn from that. I
Yeah.
get to be like, oh, this is, now that I'm thinking about it, I made that decision because of this, or might be this. And like, I'm lucky to have a partner who I can just go to and just be like, yeah, I kind of ate that thing and made me feel like crap. Why did I eat it? Or I don't like feeling like this. I felt like this last time too that I ate it. So, I have somebody to bounce it off of and be like, I'm not going to make that decision for a while again until I consciously choose it, and then have a plan on how I'm going to do it. So that's what we're doing. Constant. It's just like a shift, and helping people with that shift of self-awareness and consciousness.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and what you said is true. Is like, if those who are listening want to work with us, it's like, yeah, it's pick your poison. Ruben and I we have totally different styles and how we choose to approach
right.
our development, and so we're gonna have different styles on how we choose to um, coach. And so, if you can reach out to either of us and learn more. We do consultation sessions, so you can reach out and learn more about our approach, our systems, how we bring people to a certain place. And everyone's different, and so whoever resonates more with your style is better for you.
Exactly.
uh, and outside of coaching, like we mentioned before, we're going to be offering so much. It doesn't We're not saying that if unless you pay to work with us, that's the only opportunity. We're going to be, like I said, we're going to be developing more content, through our own channels, talking about things that's important to us, and whether that's blogs, video, hosting events, all those things, that's on the horizon. So you're going to have a lot of different opportunities to engage with our thought process, and we're going to be building practices for you to take advantage of. And all that content's going to be free. You're going to be able to find it on YouTube, on our websites, all that shit. So, stay tuned, because this mini empire is about to become not so mini, my brother. We're about to take it to the next level.
That's what 2021's about.
Right, baby. That's right. Cool,
All right.
man. Well, we're gonna wrap it up.
We're wrapping it up. All right. This well, I know that you're gonna have a website up soon, so folks, it will be updated in the show notes. So if you're curious to see what Jesse or I is working on, our website links are there. But as usual, you can always reach out to us via Instagram. Where else can people find us, Jesse?
Well, I will just clarify that by the time this episode comes out, the website will not be up, but probably by the next one, the website will be up. So stay tuned. But yeah, you can go reach out to Rubens, and then yeah, just follow us on the gram. DM us anytime. We are here. We are happy to chat. More than anything, of course, we want to build our businesses. Of course, we want to generate, more income from what we're bringing to the planet. It's important. And what's more important is that there are people out there like you who is listening, who is stepping up and bringing their, creative uniqueness to the world. So if there's ways we can support you with that, hit us up. This is not a time to be stingy. This is a time to come together and support one another towards a greater future. So aho on that, brother.
Aho. And as always, please share this with someone if you feel like it was impactful for you. And leave a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts so that it can be shared amongst people. People can find it easier. So continue to do that. And thank you again for supporting us. Jesse, any final words before we jump off this?
Nah, have a wonderful day. Have a great evening and good night, folks. Peace.
Peace.